Picture a solitary man stepping out of a mountain cave at dawn, after years of hermitage with only an eagle and a serpent for company. He watches the rising sun and decides it is time to descend and share the wisdom he has gathered, much like the sun freely giving its light. This vivid scene opens "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," a philosophical journey that reads like a mytho-scripture. The book's central figure, Zarathustra, is a prophet of sorts, a creation of a bold thinker of the 19th century, who comes down from the heights to challenge humanity with radical ideas. From the very first pages, we sense we are in for something extraordinary. A blend of poetic storytelling and profound philosophy, delivered with the dramatic flair of a sage addressing the world. Thus Spoke Zarathustra was written by Friedrich Nietzsche, but it is no dry academic treatise. It's a daring blend of philosophy and storytelling. Instead of laying out arguments in a formal logical sequence, the author speaks through the character of Zarathustra, who wanders through towns and wilderness, delivering sermons, telling allegorical tales, and even breaking into song. This unconventional approach makes the ideas feel very much alive. One moment, Zarathustra is proclaiming astonishing news: God is dead, to a bewildered saint in the forest. The next, he is trying to inspire a crowd in the marketplace to aspire beyond ordinary human limits. The whole work feels like an ancient myth reborn for modern times, using the voice of a prophet to unsettle everything people thought they knew about morality, religion, and the meaning of life. At the heart of Zarathustra's journey is a dramatic declaration: God is dead. When Zarathustra says these words, he's not merely denying the existence of a deity. He is announcing that the old foundations of value and truth have collapsed. In the world of this story, people can no longer rely on traditional religion or societal norms to tell them what is right or why life matters. This death of the old God symbolizes the end of an era in which morality was taken as absolute and handed down from above. What happens after the death of God? The answer posed in Zarathustra's teaching is both perilous and exhilarating. It means that humanity stands at a crossroads: either fall into despair and meaninglessness, or find the strength to create new values and a new purpose for itself. The book is essentially about choosing the latter path, about forging meaning in a world where the old sureties have vanished. The beacon offered to guide humanity out of this moral wilderness is the idea of the Übermensch, or overman. Zarathustra urges his listeners to imagine a higher kind of human being, someone who will transcend the limitations and weaknesses that define us now. Man is something that shall be overcome, he proclaims, comparing humanity to a bridge between an animal and something greater, rather than an end in itself. The Übermensch is not a tyrant or a superhuman comic book hero, but an individual who has mastered themselves and moved beyond the old definitions of good and evil. This figure represents creative power and inner freedom, the ability to say an unflinching yes to life with all its suffering and all its joy, and to mold meaning out of that affirmation. When Zarathustra first shares this vision in public, addressing a crowd gathered to watch a tightrope walker, it is met with scorn and mockery. The people find the idea too bizarre and audacious, and they prefer the comfort of what is familiar. In the middle of Zarathustra's passionate speech, the crowd's attention turns back to the spectacle. A clown knocks the tightrope walker off balance, sending the poor performer plunging to his death. The crowd laughs and disperses, caring more about the cheap entertainment than the prophet's lofty message. This grim little episode serves as a lesson for Zarathustra. He realizes that such profound truths won't be received by everyone, certainly not by those unwilling to look beyond amusement and routine. Disheartened but resolved, he decides he will no longer try to preach to the masses. Instead, he will seek out a few companions who might be ready to strive alongside him. He also teaches that to reach a higher state, one must undergo inner transformations. Zarathustra describes the spirit undergoing three metamorphoses, like animals changing shape. First, the spirit becomes a camel, a creature of burden and endurance. In this stage, an individual loads themselves with heavy weights, difficult knowledge, daunting tasks, and all the trials life can throw. The camel stoically bears these burdens, crossing the desert of life with determination. It says, "I will do anything, hard or demanding, out of strength and devotion." But this burden bearing is only the beginning of the journey. After the camel has proven its strength, the spirit must become a lion. The lion embodies rebellion and freedom. It must confront a great dragon that stands in its way. On the dragon's scales, gleaming in gold, are the words, "Thou shalt." The dragon represents all the old commandments and truths imposed by external authority, everything that says, "You must and you must not." The lion's task is to slay this dragon. In other words, the individual must rebel against and destroy the power of imposed values and expectations. With a mighty no, the lion claims its freedom from all masters. This fierce act of independence clears the way for something new. Yet, even the lion's victory is not the final transformation. Finally, after the lion's iconoclastic fury, the spirit becomes a child. The child symbolizes a new beginning, innocence, and the playful creation of new meaning. Having freed itself from the old rules, the spirit as a child now says a joyful yes to life. With the creativity and openness of youth, it can invent fresh values, like a child at play inventing new games. This third metamorphosis represents the ultimate goal, a spirit that has gone through discipline and rebellion and has arrived at a place of wisdom that feels as simple and natural as a child's laughter. In this state, one is truly free to shape one's own destiny. Through this parable, Zarathustra illustrates the inner path of self-overcoming, from carrying the heaviest truths, to breaking one's chains, to finding a new innocence. It's a poetic way to show how a person might break away from old morals and become a creator of their own values. Implicit in all these teachings is a bold reversal of traditional values. Qualities that old moral codes praised as virtuous, meek obedience, self-denial, humble submission, are now cast in a skeptical light. Zarathustra suggests that some of those virtues were perhaps ways to tame and weaken people rather than truly uplift them. In their place, he holds up a very different set of ideals: strength of spirit, courage, creativity, and even a kind of proud self-reliance. This isn't a license to be cruel or selfish. Rather, it means that life's vitality and personal growth are valued above the act of obeying any one-size-fits-all rulebook. In this new vision, what is good comes from affirming life, not denying it. For example, in an earlier age, the ideal of saintliness might be a person who renounces the world, lives in poverty, or even punishes their body to prove their holiness. Zarathustra's ideal is the opposite: a person who embraces the world completely, who takes joy in the body and in the beauty of nature, who isn't afraid to celebrate existence. In this book, holiness is reimagined not as rejecting life's pleasures, but as loving life so much that one wouldn't trade it for any promised heaven. Virtue becomes the courage to be oneself fully and to trust one's own path. In this sense, the book really does turn morality on its head. It asks each of us to become, in a sense, an artist of our own life, to create our character and values actively, rather than simply coloring inside the lines drawn by others. A recurring theme in Thus Spoke Zarathustra is the value of solitude. Again and again, Zarathustra finds he must leave the company of others in order to grow into his truth. He spends years in isolation on his mountain, and even after he comes down to share his wisdom, he often returns to that solitude when he feels misunderstood or simply overwhelmed by society's noise. This withdrawal isn't portrayed as loneliness in the negative sense, but as a necessary retreat for renewal. Away from the crowd, Zarathustra can converse with himself, with nature, and with his own soul without distraction. In these quiet moments, insight blossoms. It's as if the story suggests that sometimes we need distance from the world to hear our own voice and develop our own ideas. Yet thus spoke Zarathustra is not advocating a life of permanent seclusion. Zarathustra returns to humanity time and again out of love and hope. Each time he goes back to his cave, it's to gain strength or clarity. And each time he descends again, it's because he genuinely cares about the future of humankind. The balance between solitude and engagement is delicate. The book acknowledges that a person seeking truth or aiming to transform themselves may at times feel deeply alone. But it also insists that the goal of this transformation is ultimately to give back to the world. Zarathustra wants companions, not blind followers. He encourages others to find their own way, even if that means they must eventually leave him. This dynamic gives the narrative a rhythm of advance and retreat, like the flow of tides or the cycle of day and night. Wisdom is shown as something that sometimes requires stepping away, and then courageously returning to share what one has found. As the story progresses, Zarathustra faces perhaps his greatest internal challenge, a thought so heavy he struggles to utter it aloud. This is the idea of eternal recurrence. In essence, Zarathustra asks us to imagine time not as a line, but as a circle. If time is a circle, then every moment we experience will happen over and over again, infinitely. Every joy, every sorrow, every trivial moment, and every great decision, each will return in exactly the same way, an unending number of times. On its face, this idea can be terrifying or disheartening. It suggests that all the pain we endure will be endured again and again, with no final escape. The book illustrates this horrifying idea with a vivid hallucination. Zarathustra dreams of a shepherd choking, a black serpent having slithered into the shepherd's mouth. The shepherd is paralyzed by fear and disgust, much as anyone might be when confronted with the thought of having to relive their worst moments eternally. At first, it seems the shepherd will suffocate on this terrible idea. But then, mustering a final surge of will, he bites off the serpent's head. He spits it out and can breathe again. Suddenly, the shepherd is transformed. He erupts into laughter, glowing and alive, as if newly liberated. The nightmare turns into a kind of triumph. This startling image is a metaphor for overcoming the despair that the idea of eternal recurrence can bring. What does this strange vision mean? It suggests that even the most dreadful realization can be overcome by a change in attitude. Biting off the serpent's head is a symbol for confronting the idea of eternal return head-on and refusing to be defeated by it. The result of that confrontation is laughter, a deep, life-affirming laughter. Zarathustra is showing that if one can accept the prospect of living every moment of life over again forever and still rejoice, then one has achieved a kind of ultimate affirmation of existence. Eternal recurrence, in this sense, isn't presented as a literal fact about the universe so much as a moral or spiritual test. Can we say an unconditional yes to life? Can we love our fate enough that even endless repetition cannot break our spirit? Zarathustra implies that the truly enlightened or heroic soul, what he would call the Overman, is able to do exactly that, to embrace even eternal repetition, because their love of life is that strong. It's a question thrown to the reader as well. If some messenger told you that your life, with all its ups and downs, would repeat endlessly, how would you react? Would you be crushed by that weight? Or could you too bite off the serpent's head and laugh? It's worth noting that the way all these ideas are delivered is highly unusual. Thus Spoke Zarathustra does not read like a typical philosophical essay at all. Instead of dry arguments, it presents itself as a kind of poetic saga. We encounter a laughing sun, an eagle, and a serpent as companions, caves and mountaintops, and a host of mysterious characters. Every image feels loaded with meaning, as if the story is speaking in a language of myths and metaphors. Zarathustra's speeches are often composed of short, punchy sayings that sound like proverbs or prophetic utterances. The book is famous for these aphorisms. Some of them are straightforward, but many are cryptic and require pondering. One must have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star, Zarathustra declares in one of his most quoted lines. What does it mean exactly? The book doesn't spell it out, and that's the point. Such lines invite us to reflect and interpret for ourselves. This style can be bewildering at times, but it also makes the experience interactive. The reader isn't just passively receiving information, but actively grappling with meaning. Even the structure of the narrative breaks with convention. There's no traditional plot. Instead, the book is organized into a series of discourses, songs, and visions that circle around the same themes. This cyclical structure mirrors the book's content. Just as it preaches eternal recurrence, even the storytelling itself feels a bit recursive. The result is that reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra can feel more like listening to a symphony or following a spiritual journey than reading a treatise. It washes over you in waves. At times, you might feel lost or overwhelmed by the allegories, but then a moment of clarity or a powerful image will suddenly strike you. This ebb and flow seems intentional. It engages the reader's imagination and emotions continuously. You find yourself not just analyzing the ideas intellectually, but experiencing them. It's as if you walk alongside Zarathustra, sharing in his triumphs, doubts, and revelations, which makes the philosophy feel personal and impactful. The influence of Thus Spoke Zarathustra on philosophy and culture has been profound. Its daring confrontation with the death of God and its celebration of self-determined values foreshadowed many intellectual debates of the 20th century. Existentialist thinkers, for example, would later grapple with similar questions about finding meaning in a world without inherent purpose. Questions Zarathustra had already raised in dramatic form. The book has also inspired countless readers to rethink their own values and priorities. Its poetic style, though unusual, made the philosophical ideas resonate on a gut level, influencing not only academic philosophy, but also literature, psychology, and even political thought. However, the work's ambiguity and passion have also led to misunderstandings. Perhaps the most notorious example is the concept of the Übermensch, which was distorted long after the book's publication by certain groups to promote toxic ideologies that the author would have vehemently opposed. Such misreadings aside, the true message of Zarathustra is not about breeding a master race or dominating others. It is about each individual transcending their former self. When understood in context, it's actually a very humanistic vision, focused on personal growth, creativity, and responsibility in the absence of divine commandments. In the end, reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra is like embarking on a wild journey of the spirit. It challenges as much as it inspires. This book doesn't hand us comfortable answers. Instead, it poses daring questions and beckons us to find our own answers. The figure of Zarathustra ultimately leaves us with an open-ended challenge rather than a final doctrine. He asks us, in effect, what we will do in a world where old certainties have crumbled? Will we complacently settle into mediocre comforts, or will we dare to seek higher goals and truer expressions of ourselves? That question remains as vital today as it was when this work first appeared. For all its strange imagery and soaring rhetoric, the core message of Thus Spoke Zarathustra strikes a deeply human chord. It is a call to personal awakening and self-overcoming. It suggests that within each of us lies something that can rise above, a potential to grow, to create meaning, and to affirm life wholeheartedly. Finishing the book, you may be left with the sense of having witnessed the sunrise of the soul. There's a feeling that a new day is dawning, not in the outside world, but inside our own perspective, and that we, like Zarathustra, descending his mountain, have both the opportunity and the responsibility to bring some new light back to humanity.